Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Sekani, a podcast for people in their 20s who are trying to figure out life and not get lost along the way. Today's guest is Cheyenne Heflin, a motivational speaker, advocate, and counseling trainee who is passionate about helping people navigate adversity with resilience, humor, and hope. As a cancer survivor, above knee amputee, and someone living with chronic illness, Cheyenne has faced life-changing challenges that could have defined her story, but instead they've become the foundation of her purpose. Through a blend of personal experience and professional counseling training, she helps people rediscover their identity when trauma, illness, or hardship tries to take it away. Cheyenne, welcome to Conversations with Sekani. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Of course, thank you so much for having me on today.
All right. Okay. So, Cheyenne, I want you to take us back, right, to your 20s, basically. So I'd like to know, what was life like for you then, and what were the goals, dreams, and ambitions driving you?
Yeah, of course. So this all kind of started it feels like forever ago, even though really it hasn't been that long. When I was like 13 or 14, I ended up diagnosed with osteosarcoma, which is a
Mm,
pediatric bone cancer. And of course, at 13 or 14 years old, you're not thinking anything about like your own mortality. And then suddenly to have that all thrust upon me and have to go into cancer treatment was just overwhelming is really the only word. There's a lot of words, but the true feeling is just you're so overwhelmed that you can't really feel anything.
mm,
I was in treatment for a little over a year, and as part of that, I was supposed to undergo a partial femur full knee replacement. So they would take out the part of my femur that had the tumor, take out my knee, replace it with metal, right?
right, right.
But when they went in to do the surgery, my surgeon came out halfway through to talk to my dad, and he told him that the tumor was wrapped around my femoral artery, which, if you don't know, that's basically the biggest blood supply in your leg.
Mm,
And so they took it out, but they put like a spacer in, which is a piece of medical concrete they use when they're not quite ready to put the implant in yet, because they wanted to test and see, like, is the tumor actually dead or not? Because that would change a lot of
mm,
things. He came back a few days later, and it turned out the entire tumor was basically still alive. The outer edge of it had been killed off by the chemo, but we think because it had that blood supply, it was able to keep itself alive despite all the chemo that we had pumped into me for the months prior. And so he gave us two options. He said we could go through with the normal operation, the bone replacement, but it was going to double the chances the cancer would spread to my lungs, which with
mm,
osteosarcoma is kind of considered a death sentence.
mm,
Or we could amputate, give the best odds that nothing is left over, and go from there. And so at like 14 years old, I ended up deciding to go ahead with an above knee amputation
mm,
and ended up disabled. Thankfully, the rest of treatment went perfectly fine. I ended up finishing that year out. And right as I was starting high school, I left treatment to start, recovery and getting back to normal life. The thing at the time is that there wasn't a lot of help for how to adjust back to normal life after you've been through something like cancer.
mm,
And so I found myself kind of struggling through adjusting to what the chemo had done to my body, what being an amputee meant for me as far as being able to do things, on top of everything you're already doing in high school, anyways, which is feeling awkward, feeling out of place, and trying to figure out who you are. I would say I kind of struggled with this until Yeah, I guess it would be my 20s. So like early 20s when I was in undergrad. I had a semester where I was taking like pre-med classes. My whole goal after chemo was to become an oncologist. I was like, I want to be the doctor that helped me when I was going through all this. That was my goal. I built everything I did and was off of becoming an oncologist. And then I took some pre-med classes and I ended up failing two of them in the same semester. And it felt like my entire identity fell apart because I was like, oh no, I don't know that I'm going to be able to do this. I don't know that I can do this chemistry and this math. If I can't do this, then who am I? I've built everything that I have done for the last like 7 or 8 years off of becoming an oncologist. So then what else is there? And it kind of just kept getting worse. So I had to retake those classes. I was doing research and volunteering and all the stuff pre-meds have to do to make their applications look good. And then I kind of had a breakdown the next year. I dropped everything. I dropped my research, my volunteering. I was gonna finish out my classes because I needed credits anyways, but I was like, I can't do this pre-med thing anymore. I can't do it. And then COVID happened. Everything got switched online, and I was suddenly stuck at home with none of the stuff that I had been doing. And I genuinely just realized like I didn't even know who I was or what I wanted anymore. Now that all of that had kind of been stripped away without me really choosing it to be. I finally went to therapy. It took a lot of years for me to get to a point where I thought I needed therapy. I finally went to therapy around COVID and started realizing that a lot of what I was doing was kind of almost gaslighting myself in a way, like feeling like I have to do this because I have to make some meaning out of going through what I did and still being here afterwards. And so I had built my entire identity, my entire being around that, effectively like shutting off every other part of myself. And so with therapy, I started exploring like how the traumas that had happened to me impacted how I was living in the present. Basically, the idea that like I wasn't actually really living, I was kind of just surviving from moment to moment because nothing really felt safe. And it finally kind of clicked for me just how much everything that had happened to me was still impacting me at this point, almost 10 years later. And I remember feeling so sad because I was like, I don't deserve to have that still impacting me 10 years later. I deserve to be who I am outside of what has happened to me. And of course, it's never as simple as you have the epiphany and, ooh, everything's fine now. I did a lot of growing between 2020 and finally deciding to go to counseling school in 2023. But the one thing they don't tell you about counseling school before you start is uh, it will make you look at yourself even harder than you already have. Because how can you hold space for other people if you can't hold space for yourself? And that's exactly what happened to me. My first semester, I struggled to actually be authentic when acting as the counselor because it still didn't feel safe. And one of my professors actually pulled me aside and was like, hey, I can tell you're really struggling with this. Are you okay? And I was like, no, no, I'm not. And so I did the smart thing. I went back to therapy again because the answer is therapy. But uh it was kind of a beautiful tandem because I was getting my own therapy, but then my therapist also knew I was training to be a therapist. And so I got to explore like what would it mean for me to present more of my authentic self not just like with my friends, right? But just to anybody, like complete strangers, basically, because that's what you're doing as a counselor. And my program was so supportive that I started taking those little steps, right? Dipping my toe in the
Mm.
water in the safe space that was class and getting to, we're all role playing, right? So, in a way, that helps because you all are feeling super awkward because you're role playing with each other.
Mm.
And I had this moment in my group therapy class where I finally just kind of had a moment where I said, screw it. And I leaned really hard into like my natural, like instinctual reactions one day. And I got so many compliments from my classmates about like they could feel me being authentic and how like therapeutic I was being for them. And I suddenly realized like that is me. I am therapeutic. I am like, if I am myself, I can do exactly what I've been wanting to do this whole time, ever since I left cancer that first time. If I just act like myself, which seems like such a simple message, but it hit home so hard because I finally felt like I belonged and I found what I was good at and passionate about in life. And so I was kicking butt in my program. I was one of the like top students at my sites. Everybody really loved me. It was going great. We were coming up on the end of the program. I was ready to graduate, get my license, start working. That last semester is internship in my program. So basically, you're working 40 hours a week to get training hours. And I had been dealing with kind of a persistent cough, which didn't bother me at first because I have asthma. So I was like, okay, my asthma's gotten worse. Whatever, I'll go to the doctor. But we kept trying medications and it just wasn't really working. And so my GP was like, okay, let's get an x-ray, look at your lungs, see what we're dealing with, because clearly something's bothering you. And I was like, okay, that's fine. It comes back, and there's something on the x-ray. And my GP's like, we're
Mm.
getting you into a CT scan next week because we need to see what this is. The CT scan comes back, it's a mass. And based on the way it looks on the CT scan, they're very concerned that it is the recurrence of my osteosarcoma from at this point
Mm.
13 years earlier. So I had to effectively drop everything. I had to stop my internship. I had to do a leave of absence from my program to go get a biopsy done ASAP because this mass was big. It was very big, and concerning. And so I ended up at Moffitt here in Tampa, Florida for my biopsy. And sure enough, my osteosarcoma had come back 13 years later. And for context, I found out when I was talking with the doctor at this point that the odds that it recurs this late is less than 1%.
Mm.
And so now here I was again having to drop absolutely everything in my life to go get cancer treatment again, right at the point where I thought I was going to get to actually start living my life and actually enjoying myself.
Mm.
And I'm not going to say it didn't suck because it did. It is, again, one of the hardest things I have ever been through in my life, probably only topped by the first time I went through cancer. But I think the kind of beautiful thing I realized as I was going through it this time was I was able to hold much better space for myself now than I was when I was a kid. I was able to take care of not just like me just surviving my day to day, but also like taking care of those other parts of myself that kind of got shoved away the first time. Making sure I was still enjoying my hobbies, making sure that I was still like connecting with people, like being a human being, despite also having to be a cancer patient again. And that was kind of the big turning point for me in going through this experience was realizing my biggest issue when I was a kid and up until very recently was I focused so much on one part of myself. I was a trauma survivor or I was a cancer survivor, and I would get stuck in it and nothing else would matter because I had to make meaning out of these things that happened to me. And that's important. Making meaning is important. But in doing so, I neglected every other part of my identity that made me a whole human being. And so this time around, I was able to take care of the whole person that is Cheyenne instead of just the cancer patient. And I don't know, it just was such a pivotal, I don't want to say inspiring, but I can't think of a better word right now. Inspiring moment for me. Like, I was proud of myself because it felt like I had finally grown past like being stuck in all the trauma that had happened to me. And I had proof of that because here I was not letting this new trauma keep me stuck. And so
Mm,
now I'm kind of reinvigorated. I have a year before I can go back and finish my internship because I need time to recuperate before I can go back and physically like manage doing the
mm,
internship. And so now I'm kind of using this time to take care of the other parts of myself, not just like physically recovering as a cancer patient, but also making sure I feel fulfilled creatively, hobbies wise, connecting with people, because really that is the thing trauma does to us is it separates us from who we are as people. And the way to not let trauma win, or not
mm,
win, but like control us, is to
mm,
bring those parts of our identities back and give them the space they deserve. And so that's kind of what has brought me here today.
mm. Wow. Honestly, Cheyenne, I want to say thank you for sharing your story so openly, right? I believe that your story is going to change lives. I mean, there are people who has not even been through half of what you've gone through, right? Yet some of them feel stuck. Not to say, not to, shame them or anything, but it just shows your strength, right? Your story is one of strength, resilience. Wow. Ooh, shout out to you anyways. I was just gonna say that, right?
Thank you.
Cheyenne, like I mentioned, right? There are people who just face major setback and they feel like, life has been permanently derailed, right? They just feel stuck and they do not see anything, ahead of them anymore. And it's hard. I know it's hard, but what advice would you give to someone who is struggling to believe that they can move forward?
Well, I'll definitely start this conversation by saying like I am able to talk about it openly now, right? But that's
Right.
after 13 years of working on it,
Mm,
basically. I was that
mm,
person. I did feel stuck.
mm,
I think the thing I've kind of realized over the years is first off, acting like you're not stuck is just going to keep you stuck. Like, you have to
mm,
acknowledge the pain you're in and that you feel hopeless in order to actually move on from it. That was something I struggled with a lot for the first like 5 years or so after everything happened. I would be like, oh, life's fine now. Everything's fine. I'm okay. And the answer is no, I wasn't okay. I was struggling. Could I still be enjoying life? Yes, but I was struggling mentally up here where nobody could see. The other thing, and I think this kind of is a theme you'll see kind of with everything I'm talking about, is you just have to practice being able to see the other stuff that's happening in your life. So, the thing I've kind of been doing and practicing is when I have a thought like that, I just add the word and afterwards and see where it takes me. So, I feel like nothing is going to happen to me and I can still keep trying, right? It's recognizing that things can feel hopeless, but you always have a choice to keep trying. There's always an option. It might not be your favorite option, it might not be the best option, but there almost is always an option. And that flexibility to be able to see that helps a lot with pulling you out of the dark place that gets you stuck.
Hmm. Wow. Oh, all right. I love that you acknowledge the fact that it's actually not easy, right? You said it took you 13 years. Wow. Hmm. All right. So, what I'm curious about is when you look at healing, right? Because I remember I spoke with a guest about this. We all just, I feel like sometimes we want the pain to go away, right? Like, I don't want to ever feel the way I feel anymore. I want to totally heal. So I asked this guest, is it possible for someone to actually totally heal? And she said, it isn't, right? We just have to learn to live with it. And the reality of that just struck me like, whoa. I actually want to heal totally, right? I want to forget everything, but it's not possible. So I want to hear from you, right? What does it feel like to, say you are healed, right? Like you've healed, you've come to a point where you do not feel pain anymore, right? Do you have to live with it or does it just go away?
I wouldn't say it's completely gone. I
Mm,
think my view of the pain has changed. And
mhm,
so it doesn't affect me as much. At first, that was exactly how I thought. I just wanted to not feel pain anymore. But the reality is like even if like these things don't bother me anymore, right? There's always going to be something. So instead, I've kind of been working on, and I say working on because I still struggle with this on a regular
mm,
basis, but I'm actively practicing. Um, Looking at it is I can't feel like the profound joys of my life without feeling the profound pains of my life. The reality is like pain, sadness, depression, they're not inherently bad. Like they're not morally bad, right? They're negative for sure, but we don't have to treat them like they're some awful thing that we don't want to have anymore. So I have moments where my depression flares up and I feel really bad, right? I give
mm,
myself grace in those moments because I recognize like I have depression. I'm going to have moments where this pain comes up and I'm feeling it again. But then I'm going to have moments where I'm having like the greatest day of my life and nothing else is going to matter. And I'm gonna have days where I'm just pleasantly neutral, right? Where it's not like super crazy good or super crazy bad. It's just pleasant and wonderful and good. Like I think trying to ignore pain or not feel pain or negativity inherently is just gonna make it more powerful. It's in allowing ourselves to feel it that we are able to then let it kind of, instead of getting stuck, just pass through us so we can move on, which makes it all the less powerful, I think, in the long run.
mm.
So I guess to
Oh,
to
yeah.
actually answer you, when I say I'm healed, right? I don't mean that I don't feel pain anymore. I mean that I have learned to live with it and it doesn't have power over me like it used to.
Yeah. All right. So, like you said, it doesn't have power over you like it used to, right? And once something do not have power over you, you you technically become, better, right? You feel better, you feel lighter, and you do not feel, should I say, there's no heavy weight drawing you back anymore around such thoughts. Right. So yes, thank you, Shane. Honestly, I would say this has been amazing. Right. And like the purpose of my podcast is to give, advice, right, to people out there who are probably just doing life as it comes, right? People who need guidance, right? And so for young adults who are dealing with, should I say, disappointment, uncertainty, or circumstances beyond their control, what practical advice would you offer for building resilience one day at a time?
I think the advice I would offer is always remember that like the world is going to do things to you all the time, but you always have a choice in how you respond to those things. Even when the entire world's falling apart and you literally can't control anything that's going on around you, you can always control how you are acting and how you're responding to it and how you are choosing to present, like who you are. And I think like at its core, remembering that is important because it's a grounding space when everything is chaotic around you.
Hmm. All right. Wow. So yes, thank you, Sharon. Honestly, this has been amazing. Your story is a powerful reminder that while adversity can change the course of our lives, it doesn't have to define who we are, right? So
Mhm.
your honesty, resilience, and ability to, find hope shows that healing isn't about returning to who we are, but it's discovering who we can become, right? Despite what has happened. So that is what is really important, Cheyenne, and thank you for that. And it brings me to the final segment of my podcast. I call it the rapid fire segment, right? You
Mhm.
could, right, you could answer with a word or a phrase starting now. So, what is one word that describes your 20s?
Awkward.
Wow. All right. So, what is one word that describes you now?
Confident.
Confidence. Wow. Okay. So, what is a book that's inspired you?
Oh, a book that's inspired. The Fault in Our Stars.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. And what is one message every young person needs to hear?
You're gonna be okay.
You're gonna be okay. Wow. Very important, actually. All right. So, yes, thank you, Cheyenne. And before you go, where can listeners get to learn more about you and also connect with you?
Absolutely. So you can either go to my website, which is just CheyenneHeflin.com, or on Instagram and TikTok, I am at resilient underscore AKA. And I'm kind of posting there about what I'm doing with this lovely gap year I have before I get to go back and finish my degree.
All right, well, and I'm gonna put the links right in the show notes so it's easily accessible for listeners, right? And to my listeners, I want to say thanks for tuning into Conversations with Sekani. If this episode sparked something in you, just as it did in me, make sure to share to someone you think might need this and also subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. Once again, thank you, Cheyenne. Do have a wonderful day ahead of you.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care.